Welcome learners. We have already discussed about the evolution of childhood, how we can define childhood in different perspectives, how childhood can be seen as a result of social construction. In the similar way, the next stage, that is adolescence, it is also an important concept that needs a lot of discussion. In today's video, we will discuss about adolescence in different cultures. The main points that we cover today are the concept of adolescence, evolution of adolescence, adolescence in different cultures, adolescence as a special transition period, perspectives on adolescence. After watching this video, you should be able to define the term adolescence, to develop understanding about the evolution of adolescence, to analyze the development of adolescence in different cultures, and to examine the various perspectives on adolescence. Generally, what is coming in our mind is about how we can define the term adolescence, as well as how the term adolescence is derived in society. When we look at the derivation of the term adolescence, it is derived from the Latin verb adolescere, which means to grow up and to grow to maturity. And this denotes the physiological development of adolescence. And when we think of adolescence in psychological perspective, generally we may say that adolescence is the bridge between childhood and adulthood. Sometimes you have seen how the terms teenager and adolescent are used interchangeably in different literatures. When we think of a person in terms of teenager, we will define it as the biological age between 13 to 19 years old. Whereas in the case of adolescent, we may think that the age may be a criteria to define the term adolescent, but it is difficult to define in terms of age-related boundary. Why not adolescent can be an age approach, or why can't we define the term adolescence using the age approach? There are three reasons for that. Number one, variation in the age of onset of puberty. When we look at this biological change, we know that the age that a person attains puberty is differing from individuals to individual. And there is not a fixed age that when an adolescent attains puberty. Secondly, when we think of the term age, it is not a psychological variable. It is a construct, and it is not a psychological variable. Thirdly, this adolescence age can be seen as a transition from childhood to adulthood, where it do not represent the same sequence, or it may not follow the same sequence. Let me discuss about the evolution of adolescence. When we think of the evolution, we can categorize the society into two: pre-industrial society and industrial society. When we discuss about the concept of childhood, we have discussed in detail about the features of pre-industrial and industrial society. Let me think of this pre-industrial society where the children are represented as miniature adults or small adults in making. So there is no voice for the children. They are considered as adults and they have to play the role of adults, or they are looking like adult-like images. And coming to the industrial society, what we can see is that through this industrialization, what happens? The necessity of skilled laborers arises, which compel the parents to send their children to school. So because of schooling, we can see that these stages like childhood, then adolescence developed. And more than that, the government are compelled to restrict child labor. So this restriction of child labor also arises. Next point, what we are going to discuss is that when we think of adolescence in different cultures, there we can see that the physical maturation and the process of social redefinition during adolescence may vary significantly throughout cultural, social, and historical context. Let me take examples of some puberty rites, rituals, what is happening or what has happened in society or what is happening in society. Take the case of Samoa. There the ritual is stating as tattooing. And in the case of Judaism, the ritual where an individual attain the maturity, they will celebrate a ritual known as bar mitzvah or bar mitzvah. In that way, there are two terms where they are using. One is bar mitzvah and the other one bat mitzvah. Coming to the Nayar community in Kerala, we can see that there they will celebrate when a girl attains maturity or puberty. There they will celebrate a ritual known as Tiruvandukuli. So there we can see that the girl is decorated as if in a marriage ceremony and with turmeric and everything, where it denotes that the girl has attained puberty. Coming to the Odisha region, we can see a peculiar ritual known as Chuktiya Bunjia group, that tribe in Odisha. They will celebrate a rite known as pre-puberty rite and puberty rite. In every cultures, the way how they celebrate the puberty rituals or how they celebrate when a child attains maturity is differing. So these cultural concepts and the perspective influence a lot in terming this stage as adolescence. Next we will discuss about adolescence as a special transition period. What type of transition is taking place? It is the transition between childhood and adulthood. And we can see that during these changes, a rapid biological changes are happening among adolescent children. And the next one, what we can see, it is an important thing, that is developmental task of adolescence, where the concept of developmental task is put forward by Havikhurst. We can define developmental task as social abilities or attitudes related to development. And when we think of this developmental task, it is an important thing that is happening in human development, which is characterized by a series of long tasks where they have to attain when they entered each stage. So from one stage to the other stage, every individual is expected to develop this task. So attaining the developmental task is must, and we can see that there are certain developmental tasks that are essential in childhood, and there are some certain essential tasks that are very, very important in adolescence. Today, we can discuss how these developmental tasks are important in the adolescent stage. When we look at it, we can see that the first one, that is acquiring a masculine or feminine sex role. That is an important thing. Secondly, developing proper relations with peers of both sexes. They have to interact, or they have to know how to interact with both sexes. And the next one, what we can see is that emotionally independent of parents and other adults. When they entered the age of adolescence, there is always an identity crisis that is happening. Whether they can be considered as a child? No. Whether they can be considered as an adult? No. So this type of identity crisis is taking place, and in spite of that, they have to attain the emotional independency. Fourthly, making sure that he or she will become economically independent. And fifthly, we can see that each individual has to prepare for a vocation. After their studies, they have to learn how to enter into a vocation. And sixthly, we can see that attaining cognitive skills that lead to social competence, it's an important thing. And seventhly, achieving socially acceptable behavior is an important thing. While we consider the next developmental task, that is preparing for marriage and family, and last, acquiring socially acceptable values. We may tell that the adolescents, they don't know how to behave with elder people. But here comes the importance of training the adolescents in terms of acquiring acceptable behaviors. Next, we will discuss about the perspectives on adolescence. When we think of the perspectives on adolescence, there we can classify the perspective as social view or social viewpoint, developmental psychological viewpoint, biological viewpoint, intellectual competency viewpoint. So what is there in each viewpoint? Let me have a detailed discussion on that. Coming to the social view of adolescence, we can see that we will view an adolescence as an important period of development during which children acquire the skills and attitudes that will help them become adjusted adults who can contribute to society in meaningful ways. And it takes a good deal of time to acquire the training and skills necessary to function in adult society. And we can also see that this viewpoint, it allows the individual to learn other non-work related adult activities and skills. So during this adolescent stage, it is a stage where we can learn different types of skills and abilities that is needed in future. So this is all about the social perspective or viewpoint of adolescence. Coming to the developmental psychology viewpoint, there we will consider adolescence as a period of time for experimentation with a variety of adulthood roles and the determination of a realistic sense of the self. It is hoped that the adolescents will develop a good notion of the degree to which various kinds of social roles and social situations are comfortable. And generally, as parents or teachers, we have confronted with a question from adolescent children. What is that? Is that who am I? That question. So they may ask intellectually, who am I? In this case, when an adolescent is able to attain his own identity development, more than that telling that I am Johnny or I am Alice, more than that, if the child is able to tell about their own description, their own skills, their own perspective, there they achieve the developmental stages successfully. So in future, such type of adolescents are able to adjust in society in a very well manner and they will come forward. Coming to the biological perspective of adolescence, we can see that the biological changes take place in adolescence earlier than either the intellectual changes or the social changes. And such type of biological changes, when we look at adolescent girls and boys, we can see that the girls attain the biological changes earlier than the boys. And they will try to behave like adults earlier than the boys. Oftenly, girls are expected to behave more like adults than our boys. From a generalization point of view, adolescence is a time during which psychosocial learning can catch up to the previous occurrence of biological developmental change. The adolescent period gives the individual time to learn the social behaviors and to acquire and become comfortable with the psychological characteristics that are appropriate to a biologically mature person. Coming to the intellectual competency view of adolescence, there we can see that the adolescents develop the ability to think in terms of abstract concept, or we can say that they have developed the capability of abstract thinking. Then we can see that the adolescence becomes capable of understanding the thought processes of others and of interacting with the environment in different ways. The changes in moral thinking and in views of the self also occur as a result of these cognitive advances. And from this intellectual competency view of adolescence, when we think of that, adolescence is viewed as a time during which the individual learns to cope with formal operational thinking, which later on can be considered as an extension of the biological changes. With that, they will develop the formal operational thinking, which leads them to attain how to behave in a mature way in society and to acquire the norms and the behavior that are accepted by the society. So by this time, I hope that you might have developed understanding about the concept of adolescence, the evolution of adolescence, adolescence in different cultures, how adolescence is considered as a special transition period, and how the various views on adolescence help to understand this stage as an important stage in human development. Thank you.